I know it's been a little while since I did one of these. I'm currently moving house, so things are a bit up in the air. I haven't been able to do them as much as I would have liked to. But I am listening to books on Audible while I work on the house as well. And I am still reading. And this time around, I want to look at... That's the wrong side. I want to look at Lenin, State and Revolution. And I decided to give this a read because, to be honest, since the vilification of Jeremy Corbyn and the coming of Keith Starmer to run the Labour Party, I find myself increasingly pushed further and further left, to the point where I'm fully considering communism. So I decided to give this an actual read and look at the theory behind it. State and Revolution is essentially Lenin takes Marx and Engels' works and he applies them to the situation in which he wrote the book in 1917. And he talks about what was then the modern day socialists of the era, the opportunists he calls them, who like to take popular movements, proletariat movements, and use it to their advantage to install things that he doesn't believe Marx and Engels were aiming for. So, for instance, he talks about how Karl Marx and Engels spoke about winning the battle of democracy, but what happens then is these opportunists come along and they take that one phrase, winning the battle of democracy, as a goal of communism, and they just isolate it and use that and think that electing socialist governments is the be-all and end-all of communism, when it is not. Karl Marx explicitly states in his work, as Lenin refers to this work in this book, that the be-all and end-all of communism is the abolition of state. We're just using the state as a means to an end. So communism is all about abolishing the state, abolishing capital, so abolishing money, and becoming a classless society. And all that you do is you have a proletarian uprising. They take over the state. So that can be through violence, or it can be through the electoral process. They take over the state, and then in the transition period between capitalism and communism, that's when you have this sort of middle ground, and that's where the socialists, the opportunists, as Lenin calls them, want to stay. So that's just one example of what he talks about in State and Revolution. It's very, very interesting. It really opened my eyes to a lot of what communism is about, to be honest. It's definitely worth a read. 100% worth a read, especially when you put into context, into today's contexts, a lot of what's said here. So in my notes here, I've got, it would possibly be opportunists that smeared Jeremy Corbyn. These were the people who didn't want a full-blown socialist government, but they still support Labour. So they smeared Corbyn because they didn't want him to go as far as he wanted to go. Lenin also talks about the vanguard and the deputies. So that put into context a lot of the talk about abolish the police that's been going around in America particularly. That put a lot of that into context for me, because abolish the police isn't just like have no law, have no police force. It's reform the police, essentially. So Lenin spoke about, once the proletariat have risen to the top and they've overthrown the state, and they now run the state, getting rid of the old archaic capitalist police and military and having proletariat military, a proletariat vanguard that will enforce the common laws and the rules and the regulations that the proletariat wish to enforce, not capitalist rules. So it's very interesting to read. I'd say it's a good starting point for anybody interested in communism. Go ahead and give that a read. It's Lenin, State and Revolution. Again, I do apologise for the state of this review. I'm sort of doing it on the fly when I got a spare moment. As I say, I am in the middle of moving house, so it's a bit up in the air, a bit chaotic. Well, I will keep trying to bring the reviews to you guys as much as I can. Thanks for watching. Out of 100, I have to give that about 85% out of 100. Definitely worth a read. If you're interested in, you don't even have to be a left winger. If you're just interested in politics, that is essential reading.